Hello, my name is Alex. I'm one of the expert teachers here at E2 Language, and I also used to be an IELTS examiner. So in this session, I want to talk about IELTS speaking and explain to you and show you how an examiner gives you a score in one of the criteria. And I'm also going to show you what you can do to improve your band score in that particular area. Let's start by having a look at the criteria. This is what it looks like. This is the public band descriptors. You can find that document by following the link in the blurb below. But basically, an examiner gives you 4 separate scores for your speaking exam. You get a score for fluency and coherence, lexical resource, that means vocabulary, and grammatical range and accuracy. The 4th one is pronunciation. So if you're aiming at band 7, you need to get 7 in all 4 criteria, or you need a band 8 to balance out a band 6. This is how it works in the speaking and also in the writing. Click the link on the screen if you want to see our video about how your writing is scored. So in this session today, this video, I want to focus on the first criterion, which is fluency and coherence. Let's look at the fluency and coherence criterion. It's a little bit difficult to distinguish between these 2 points, but I want to focus mostly on the fluency aspect to begin. So let's start by zooming in on the fluency and coherence criterion. I'm looking here at band 7, 6, and 5 with all the descriptors. The reason that I've got all 3 here, 7, 6, and 5, is because if you're aiming at band 7, there's actually not that much information in that section about what you need to do. It's more important or more useful to look at band 6 and look at band 5 and see the things that you should avoid doing. So let's do that. So within each band, there are 2 or 3 dot points, and some of them relate to fluency, some of them relate to coherence. So I'm going to start with the fluency one. Along here, band 7, first bullet point, speaks at length without noticeable effort or loss of coherence. Now, obviously it mentions the word coherence here, but really this bullet point is about fluency, speaking at length without noticeable effort. Another aspect of fluency in band 7 may demonstrate language-related hesitation at times or some repetition or self-correction. So it's okay to have some language-related hesitation. You might be, for instance, you might be thinking of the verb tense or looking for a particular word, and the examiner can see that you have a slight hesitation there. That's still okay to score band 7. Down at band 6 is willing to speak at length, though may lose coherence at times due to occasional repetition, self-correction, or hesitation. So see the distinction here between speaks at length without noticeable effort in band 7 and is willing to speak at length, though may lose coherence at times due to repetition, self-correction, or hesitation. Down at band 5, meanwhile, usually maintains flow of speech, but uses repetition, self-correction, and or slow speech to keep going. So the difference here really with the first bullet points comes down to effort. So band 7, you need to show the examiner that this is easy for you, that this is not a struggle to answer these questions. Band 6, the examiner can probably see that you are hesitating a little bit. You sometimes get a bit stuck. You might self-correct a little bit too much, but it doesn't impact your communication too badly. Down at band 5, those things, repetition, hesitation, they are starting to affect your the message that you're trying to communicate. So it's having a negative impact on your communication. At band 5, there's one more feature, produces simple speech fluently, but more complex communication causes fluency problems. So perhaps the speaker can manage simple language, but when things get a bit more complex, then fluency drops. Let's go up and have a look at what happens in band 8 and band 9. Band 8 says speaks fluently with only occasional repetition or self-correction. Hesitation is usually content related and only rarely to search for language. So there's a slight distinction here between hesitating because you're looking for an idea, which is okay, and hesitating because you're looking for language, which may impact your score. So if you're thinking about a question or showing the examiner that you're giving it a little bit of consideration, that's different to pausing or hesitating because you forgot a word or you're not sure of the verb tense. Up at band 9, speaks fluently with only rare repetition or self-correction. So the difference between band 7, 8, and 9 in terms of fluency is that in band 7, there is some hesitation or repetition. Up to band 8 is occasional and band 9 is rare. So it's a very minimal distinction. That's why you can see a little bit of variation in people's scores up at those high levels where an examiner is making a very difficult choice between rare and occasional. Let's give it a try. I'm going to give you 3 questions and I want you to pause the video, grab your phone and a voice recorder app or your video, whatever you like. And I just want you to answer the questions. Imagine that you're in the speaking test. Once you've done that, push stop. I'm going to show you a checklist after, and I want you to assess yourself so you can start to get a feeling for where you would fall in terms of fluency between 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Pause the video now and answer these questions. Remember to record yourself. When you're ready, let's move on to the checklist. As you listen back to your recording, go through these points related to fluency. Give yourself a tick or a point if you think you did it. First one is I speak fluently without noticeable effort. Did you do that? I hesitate only when looking for ideas, not language. I speak with minimal repetition, and I rarely need to correct myself. If you gave yourself a tick for all of those, well done, you're on track for a band 7, 8, or 9. So now let's turn our attention to the coherence aspect of this criterion. And again, let's start with band 7, 6, and 5. So we're looking at some different bullet points here. Band 7 uses a range of connectives and discourse markers with some flexibility. So connectives and discourse markers, these are the words or the phrases that sort of stitch your answers and your ideas together. So there are things like on the one hand, on the other hand, despite this, having said that, one of the main reasons is, in contrast, those kind of words, those kind of expressions are connectives and discourse markers. So band 7 uses a range with some flexibility. Band 6 uses a range of connectives and discourse markers, but not always appropriately. So maybe you're using some of them in the wrong way. And band 5 may overuse certain connectives and discourse markers. This is quite a common problem and can cause even a very good speaker to drop to a band 5 if you are only using a couple of connectives. And 2 of the biggest ones I notice are and then. So if you're answering and, or then, you're not showing range of connectives and discourse markers. So keep that in mind as we do our next recording. Let's look at the higher band levels here. Band 8 develops topics coherently and appropriately. This is the first time we get any mention of topic development up in band 8. So there's actually no mention of it in the bands 7, 6, and lower than that. Up at band 9, speaks coherently with fully appropriate cohesive features. So the cohesive features, that's the connectives and discourse markers, and develops topics fully and appropriately. So again, here we're talking about topic development. As you can see, some of the distinguishing features between band 7 and band 8 relate to topic development. So that's why it's a good idea, even in part 1 of your speaking test, to try and give quite expanded answers. Don't just give a simple response. Wherever possible, try and bring more into it. So bring the past and the present, or compare your own opinion with other people's opinion. Those kind of extension methods will really help you to push up into the band 8 and band 9 area. So let's have another go. I want you to try these questions again. We're going to use the same questions. You've already answered these questions before. So in this second try, your fluency should already be better. There shouldn't be so much hesitation, not much repetition, not much self-correction. So now we're thinking about coherence, how well you develop your ideas, how well you stitch together, how well you use your connectives and discourse markers. So let's do it again. Grab your phone and try for round 2. Pause the video now and answer the questions. Don't forget to record yourself. And now let's go through the rest of the checklist. As you listen back, think about these points. Give yourself a tick if you did it. Did you speak coherently and use appropriate connecting words? Did you develop your topics fully and appropriately? And did you speak at an appropriate pace? I've added that one in there because band 5 mentions slow pace as a crutch. So a speaker who is using slow speech to sort of disguise their lack of fluency. So that's something else to consider as you're speaking. Of course, not speaking too quickly, but also be conscious of not speaking too carefully or too slowly, because that can affect your fluency and coherence score. So let's have a look at the full checklist here. So do you speak fluently without noticeable effort? Do you hesitate only when looking for ideas and not language? Is your repetition minimal? Do you rarely need to correct yourself? Are you speaking coherently? It all makes sense, and you're using appropriate connecting words? Are you developing your topics fully and appropriately? Are you speaking at an appropriate pace? So the big question is how to improve. As you listen back to your recordings, perhaps you're feeling like, I'm not at a 7 yet. So I'm going to tell you 3 things that you can do to try and boost your fluency and coherence as you prepare for the exam. So the first one is to practice and record yourself, just like we did here today. If you want some IELTS speaking topics, we have a list of 20 themes with part 1 and part 3 questions included. Follow the link in our blurb below. Recording yourself is a really, really useful way to pick up on your weaknesses and overcome them. The second thing you can do is to mimic. Mimic means copy. So if you find, for example, a TED talk, try to copy the way that the speaker speaks. And this also includes listening carefully and maybe reading the transcript. So try to see how this speaker connects their ideas. What are the linking words and the discourse markers that they use to compare, to contrast, to provide examples, to give their opinion, to agree, disagree, to speculate, all of those things. Take note of the exact words that they use and try to mimic them, try to incorporate that when you're practicing speaking. And the final thing, and this is important as your exam is approaching, is to immerse in English. So this means that for a short period of time, so let's say, well, as long as possible, but at least a few days before your speaking test, you should try to remove all access to your own language. Of course, this is difficult if you don't live in an English-speaking country, but it's important that you're having a lot of English input into your ears, into your eyes, coming out of your mouth, and as you're writing as well. If you turn up to the IELTS speaking test and you haven't spoken English for a week or even for 2 days, it's immediately clear to the examiner. If you imagine that you're preparing for a maths test and you spend weeks and weeks, maybe years of your life reading about history and listening to things about history and watching movies about history, and then you arrive at your maths test, how available is that maths knowledge going to be? It's not going to be front of your mind. And it's the same thing when it comes to language. If you're constantly surrounded by your own language, your English is not going to be available to you. So sometimes I feel like the person that I was examining, their English was down in their toes. It was not available, not coming to them quickly. If you've been speaking English for days and days, you're dreaming in English, you're doing everything in English, and the examiner asks you questions in English, your language is much more available. It's much more readily accessible. And that's what you need to show the examiner to get band 7. Remember that first bullet point, can speak at length without noticeable effort. So keep that in mind as you're preparing for the test. If you can, try to eliminate all access to your own language for as long as possible in the lead up to your speaking exam. You can get more help with us at e2language.com. Come and check out our courses, live classes, tutorials, and heaps more. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video with your friends. And we will see you soon on e2language.com. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.